Hello there. My name is Maria. I'm a grandmother, 68 years old. I was just trying to bring a handmade scarf to Christmas dinner, nothing more. But that night, my grandson tugged my hand and whispered, "Grandma, leave now." I didn't ask why. I just walked out. What happened next proved that trusting him saved my life. And if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, I want you to hear this. Stay with me, because the silence I walked through hid a secret none of us were supposed to survive. She wore the pearl necklace like armor, but no one looked up. The living room was warm, filled with cinnamon-scented candles and the muffled sound of chatter layered over Christmas carols. Silver bells dangled from the staircase railing, blinking with pre-programmed cheer. Maria stood in the doorway, one gloved hand still resting on the edge of the doorframe, the other clutching a small paper bag that held the scarf she had knitted for Camille. She had debated wearing the necklace. It wasn't flashy, just a simple string of pearls yellowed slightly with time, but her late husband had given it to her on their 30th anniversary, the last one before his stroke. Today, it felt like a talisman, a reminder that she was once someone's center, not an afterthought. The hallway opened into a room bustling with people she barely recognized. Neighbors, Daniel's co-workers, Camille's Pilates friends. Children zipped past her legs, not noticing. She stepped inside, smiled politely, and no one returned it. Her son stood at the far end, deep in conversation. His hands moved the same way his father's once did, short, precise gestures, but his eyes didn't find hers. Maria moved toward the kitchen. The island was piled with food. She didn't touch her appetite, dimmed by something heavier than hunger. Camille appeared dressed in crimson, holding a tray of cranberry tarts. Her smile froze slightly when she saw Maria. "Oh," Camille said, barely pausing. "You made it." "I did," Maria answered, offering the bag. "I brought you something. A scarf. Wool. I thought it might go with your coat." Camille glanced inside, nodded briefly. "Lovely. Thank you. Next time, maybe give us a heads up. We weren't sure how many to set places for." "I did call last week," Maria replied softly. "Things have been hectic. You know how the holidays are." And she was gone. Maria walked back to the dining area. The long table was filled. Laughter bounced between wine glasses. No one noticed the extra chair. Or perhaps they had, and left it askew on purpose. She sat at the card table off to the side, smaller, wobblier, reserved for leftovers and people without names. The only person who greeted her was the housekeeper passing by with a tray of empty cups. "Merry Christmas, Mrs. Harper," she said kindly before disappearing into the kitchen. Maria sat still. The pearls felt heavier on her neck, now more like memory than adornment. A bit of ribbon from her gift stuck to her sleeve. Her scarf, she noticed, had been left by the hallway lamp folded neatly, but not worn. From the corner of her eye, she saw Eli. Her grandson stood halfway down the staircase watching her. His small face was blank at first, then shifted not with joy, but with something quiet and sharp, like concern. Slowly he descended the steps, one hand gliding along the rail. He stopped beside her close enough that she could smell the faint sweetness of peppermint on his breath. "Hi, sweetheart," she whispered, touching his sleeve. He didn't smile. Instead, he leaned close to her ear. "You have to leave," he said, almost inaudibly. "Right now." Maria blinked. "What do you mean?" Eli looked down, his voice a thread. "I don't know what they're planning, but it's not good." She looked up, startled. Daniel was still laughing with guests. Camille had her back turned. No one else was paying attention. Not to the boy. Not to the old woman with pearls and nothing else. Maria stood. slowly. Her knees stiffened in protest. Eli held her hand for 1 second longer than needed, then let go. She didn't say goodbye. No one noticed. The front door creaked as she opened it. Wind pressed against her coat, sliding cold fingers beneath her collar. The snow had crusted over glittering under the fading sun. Maria stepped out the pearls at her throat, shining dully in the grey. Maria stood up, looked around. No one noticed. She walked out the door in silence. The winter wind bit through her collar. 3 police cars passed her on the highway heading back where she came from. Maria kept her hands steady on the wheel, even though her breath caught. The flashing blue lights sliced through the dusk, quick and unblinking, vanishing behind her toward Eldridge Falls. She didn't turn her head. She didn't have to. Eli's voice lingered in her ear, not loud, not urgent, but weighty in its stillness. You have to leave. Right now. The silence in the car was heavy. The radio dial glowed, faintly tuned to a classical station that was now broadcasting static. She reached for the knob, but didn't turn it. Somehow, even the fuzz of interference felt too loud. By the time she reached her cottage, the last of the sunlight had faded. The porch light hadn't come on. She had forgotten to set the timer again. As she stepped inside, the familiar creak of the floor greeted her like an old friend. But tonight, it felt more like a warning. She set her bag down and made her way to the kitchen. It was colder than usual. The heater clicked on, but the warmth was slow to spread. She reached for the kettle, then hesitated. Her hands moved automatically fill the pot light. The stove pulled down a teacup. Her fingers trembled slightly when they touched the porcelain. She didn't turn on the radio. She couldn't. Instead, she sat in the darkening room, the only light coming from the stove's blue flame. The pearl necklace was still at her throat, cool against her skin. She ran her thumb along it, slowly bead by bead. A knock at the door made her flinch. Through the frosted glass, she saw a hunched figure in a windbreaker, Mr. Everett, her neighbour from across the road. She opened the door halfway. "Evening, Maria," he said, pulling his cap off. Strange night. 3 cruisers just went barreling past, sirens full blast, headed up the ridge. He paused, studying her. "That's your Daniels Road, isn't it?" She nodded. "Yes. I left a bit ago. Christmas dinner." Everett looked thoughtful. "Hoped you weren't caught up in whatever it is." Lights everywhere. Looked serious. She tried to smile. "I'm sure it's nothing." He didn't seem convinced. "Well, just wanted to check. You let me know if you hear anything all right?" She nodded again. He tipped his hat and left. Maria closed the door slowly. The wind howled behind it. The lock clicked louder than she expected. She returned to the kitchen. The kettle was whistling softly now. She poured the water into the teacup, added a spoonful of chamomile, then sat down again. The warmth crept up through the bottom of the mug and into her palms. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She walked over and picked it up. "Eli Harper, 8:47 p.m. Don't come back." Her hand tightened around the phone. She read the message twice, then again. The tea sat untouched on the table. She tried to breathe evenly, but her chest felt tight. Her ears filled with the echo of the sirens. A knock softer this time. She turned to see a figure in uniform through the glass. 2 more stood behind him. Blue lights pulsed from the driveway. Maria opened the door, heart thudding. "Ma'am," the officer said, "we're just making rounds. We're told you left your son's house around 7 o'clock tonight." "Yes," she said. "Is something wrong?" "There's been a report of someone being poisoned at that location. We're investigating. Can we ask you a few questions?" She stepped aside, numb. Of course. They entered. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller. As one officer began taking notes, her phone buzzed again. This time the number was unrecognized. She hesitated, then tapped the message. Unknown, 9:03 p.m. He knows. Keep him quiet or else. He was shaking his backpack, clutched like it held more than notebooks. Maria opened the door slowly. The porch light flickered overhead, casting a pale cone of light around the small figure huddled on her doorstep. Eli stood there, panting, his cheeks flushed with cold and fear. His eyes darted behind him before settling on hers, wide and uncertain. Without a word, she reached out and drew him in. The door closed softly behind them. Maria flipped the hallway switch, but only one light bulb responded, buzzing faintly. Eli's hands were trembling. "Come," she whispered. "Downstairs. No one will hear us there." The basement hadn't been used in years. It smelled of old cardboard, damp wood, and forgotten memories. Maria switched on the small overhead bulb, which flickered before settling into a tired yellow glow. Dust motes danced in the stale air. Shelves lined the walls. Old mason jars, faded cookbooks, a stack of shoeboxes labelled in her late husband's handwriting. In the corner, a wooden chest stood partially open, revealing the edges of worn stuffed animals and brittle comic books. Eli hesitated at the bottom step, his breath shallow. Maria guided him gently to the old love seat near the furnace. "What happened?" she asked, her voice low, firm. "I heard them," he whispered, unzipping his backpack with shaking fingers. "Dad and someone else. In the garage. Last week. I was supposed to be asleep." He pulled out a pencil case and carefully unzipped its lining. From inside, he retrieved a small black audio recorder. "They were talking about you," Eli said. "About making sure you'd be alone. That you always came to Christmas by yourself. That it would be easy." Maria felt her stomach twist. "They didn't know I was listening," he added. "I hid under the stairs." She took the device from him, her fingers brushing his. He was warm, flushed from running or fear or both. She pressed play. The tape hissed softly, then a voice emerged, low, unmistakably Daniel's. "She'll come alone. Like always. She never asks questions. That's what makes it so simple." Silence. Then another voice, gravelly, harder to make out. "You're sure she won't notice Daniel again?" "She won't. She never does. Just make it clean." Maria stopped the recording. Her hands trembled, not from shock, but from a slow, rising clarity like fog lifting. She looked at Eli. "You brought this to me." He nodded. "I didn't know who else. I thought, maybe you'd believe me." "I do," she said. Her voice was steady now. "I do." A thump. Both turned toward the stairs. Maria moved quickly but quietly, reaching for the switch that powered the small CCTV monitor she had set up in the kitchen the year after her husband passed. Just 2 cameras, one front porch, one back door. She had almost forgotten about them. The grainy feed flickered to life. On the back door screen for a second, a shadow, human-shaped, still, watching, and then it was gone. "Mum, we called you, didn't we?" Camille tell her. Maria held the phone between her shoulder and ear hands, motionless over the sink. The morning light streamed through the small kitchen window, catching the steam rising from her untouched cup of tea. Outside, the trees swayed under a pale sky, wind slipping through the window's loose seal in whispers. She had called to ask a simple question. "Why didn't you tell me about the dinner?" But Daniel's voice had responded like a fog, dense and disorienting. "You didn't get the message," he said, gentle but surprised. "We left one." "Right, Camille." A pause, then Camille's voice light and faintly amused. "Of course, Daniel. I even texted her. Twice, I think. Maybe it didn't go through? Or, Mum, are you sure you're checking your phone regularly? Maria blinked. I check it every morning. Maybe your settings are off again. Camille continued smoothly. Happens sometimes. And Mom, you showed up 2 hours early. That's why the table wasn't ready. We didn't expect you yet. Maria gripped the edge of the counter. That can't be. I arrived at 6. I always come at 6. Are you sure? Daniel's voice softened further. It was barely 5 when you rang the bell. I remember because Eli hadn't even changed yet. The kettle clicked off behind her, but she didn't move. Listen, Daniel said. You've seemed scattered lately. Have you seen your doctor recently? Maybe it's time for a checkup. Camille's voice drifted in again. Memory stuff is tricky, Mum. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. Maria glanced toward the small kitchen table, where Eli now sat, legs swinging slightly above the floor, hands folded around a glass of milk. His eyes wide and unblinking were on her. He shook his head once firmly. She ended the call. The silence returned, as if the air itself was holding its breath. She sat down slowly, hands resting on her lap. I remember what happened, she said aloud, unsure if she was speaking to herself or the boy. Eli slid something from his hoodie pocket. It was another recorder, smaller, older. He placed it on the table and pressed play. It clicked. Daniel's voice, again, clear and measured. She signed it. She just doesn't remember. The recording ended. Maria didn't speak. She couldn't. Outside, the wind lifted a corner of the doormat. Your husband once asked me to burn something. I didn't. The words settled in the air between them like dust. Maria sat on the edge of the sagging armchair, her coat still draped over her shoulders. The room smelled faintly of pipe tobacco and paper that had waited too long to be read. Russ Monroe stood by the window, holding the recorder Maria had placed on his table minutes earlier. His fingers, thick and knotted by age, moved carefully over its edges. His eyes, though clouded at the rims, remained sharp. Behind him, a black and white photograph hung on the wood-panelled wall, 3 men in uniform, one of them Maria's husband, Thomas Harper. I remember this voice, Russ said. Daniel. And that other one? Harland. Didn't expect to hear him again. You know him? Maria asked. Russ gave a low nod. We opened a case years ago. Crown Room investigation. Your husband and I. Harland was in deep, but everything went cold. Someone pulled strings. Maria's hand gripped the armrest. Thomas told me if anything ever happened, find you. Russ smiled faintly, not with amusement, but weariness. He always planned 2 steps ahead. Eli sat quietly in the corner, his hands folded in his lap. He didn't speak, but his eyes tracked everything. The clutter of documents stacked in uneven piles, the yellowing map pinned on the far wall, the faint ring of a long-gone clock on the side table. Russ set the recorder down and walked toward an old cabinet. The hinges groaned as he opened it. He reached behind a stack of faded manila folders and pulled out a small tin box, rusted at the edges. From it, he drew a single item, a key old and corroded with a red tag tied to its loop. He gave this to me, Russ said. Told me never to use it unless someone came looking. The cabin by the lake, he called it. Never went there myself. But I kept it. Maria took the key in both hands, her fingers tingling. What's there? She asked. Don't know, Russ said. But your husband wanted it buried. And now someone's trying to keep you away. Eli stood and crossed the room. His eyes were fixed on the old map that stretched across one wall, detailed hand-drawn edges curling. There, he said, pointing to a faint red dot near the top left corner. I saw that symbol in Dad's notebook. I didn't know what it meant. Maria followed his finger. The dot had no label, no name, just a smudge of ink in the folds of forest near Eldridge Lake. But now it had meaning. If anything happens to me, this will have to be enough. The words sat in the middle of the page, written in her looping, careful script, black ink on ivory paper, steady despite the tremble in her fingers. Maria placed the note in the center of the wooden dining table directly beneath the hanging lamp that hummed with soft yellow light. It looked oddly elegant, surrounded by quiet and the smell of old books and winter. She folded her hands in her lap and stared at it for a moment longer. Then, without a sound, she slid the pen beside the paper and stood. Behind her, Eli sat on the couch, his knees pulled up under his sweater. His small backpack was zipped, bulging slightly with what little they had gathered: the recorder, the rusted key, some old maps. Russ had lent them a wool scarf Maria had knit for him 2 Christmases ago, never worn until tonight. "You remember what I said?" she asked, kneeling in front of him. He nodded, solemn. "No talking to strangers. Don't look back, and don't speak unless you have to." Maria touched his cheek gently, then stood. She moved slowly through the house, checking the locks, placing a second envelope in the kitchen drawer, one with a timeline, names, dates, just in case someone still cared to understand. The heater kicked on with a dull thud. Outside, the wind had stilled, replaced by a quiet, too thick for peace. Then the soft ping from the hallway motion detected. Maria crossed to the window. She didn't open the curtain fully, only parted it enough to glimpse the silhouette, someone standing beneath the oak tree near the edge of the yard. Still, watching. She didn't flinch. Instead, she turned and walked to the coat rack, lifted her thick woolen jacket, and shrugged it on. The keys jingled faintly in her pocket. Beside the door, a small alarm light flashed. The security camera had saved the image. She left it blinking. Eli followed her to the front hall. His breath made small clouds as it touched the glass pane in the door. A sudden crash, sharp and fast. The front window cracked with the thud of a brick tossed and gone before she could even blink. It didn't break through, only fractured a message, not an attack. Maria exhaled. Not fear. Not anger. Just knowing. She turned to Eli. "We're going." He didn't hesitate, just grabbed her hand. As the engine started, headlights slicing the night, Eli leaned toward her and whispered, "Grandma, does the cabin have a toilet?" Maria allowed herself the smallest smile. "No. But it has memories." And then they drove not away from danger, but towards something buried, something once lost, waiting to be remembered. Your grandfather never forgot this place. That's why they wanted it burned. The wind off the lake carried a damp chill as Maria stepped onto the cracked wooden porch of the old cabin. The boards creaked beneath her feet, each step a reluctant echo of memories she hadn't visited in decades. Russ stood beside the car arms, crossed his gaze, fixed on the tree line, as if guarding something more than just their backs. She turned the rusted key with effort. The door groaned open. Inside the cabin was a hushed museum of absence dust, draped over furniture like a second skin air, thick with the scent of mold and ash. One of the windows was broken shards of glass, dulled with time still clinging to the corners. The fireplace was dark, filled with the remains of something half-burned, long forgotten. Eli followed her in slowly, eyes wide, flashlight in hand. The beam swept across a collapsed armchair, a rusted kettle, a shelf of warped books. Then it paused. Here he whispered, kneeling near a loose floorboard that jutted slightly upward. Maria watched as his small fingers pried it loose. Beneath the plank, wrapped in a faded scarf, was a wooden box, simple square, unadorned. She recognized the stitching on the scarf. She'd made it years ago, a Christmas gift never delivered. Her hands trembled as she lifted the box. The clasp clicked open. Inside, a letter folded carefully. A USB stick scratched, but intact. A scanned map with red markings, familiar street names now darkened by time. And at the bottom, thick parchment, a will signed notarized, but clearly never filed. She unfolded the letter last. The handwriting was unmistakable. If you're reading this, it means they chose Daniel. I'm sorry. I didn't want to believe it. But I had to prepare. Russ knows where the trail ends. Don't trust the official copy of the will, this one is real. Maria sat down on the dusty floor, the letter trembling in her grasp. Her throat tightened, but she didn't sob. Instead, she whispered, barely more than a breath, "You remembered. And now, so do I." Outside, the trees whispered secrets to each other, their branches scraping the grey sky. Eli had wandered to the window, one hand on the sill. He was quiet for a long time. Then his voice, low, steady eyes, fixed beyond the broken glass. "Grandma? There's someone in the woods. They're not coming closer, but they're watching. I told him I'd keep it until someone asked for it. And now you're asking." The voice was neither bitter nor proud, just steady. Like someone who had waited too long for the knock at the door to feel surprise anymore. Maria stood in the narrow hallway of Grace Whittaker's apartment, hands folded around the envelope she'd carried from the cabin. Behind her, Eli's fingers brushed lightly against the seams of old wallpaper as he trailed in quietly. The apartment was a vault of the past. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined with books, file boxes stacked in corners, yellowing newspaper clippings tacked beside faded photographs. A city of memory untouched by time, ruled by a woman who had chosen not to forget. Grace motioned them in. Her hair was silver coiled neatly at her nape. Her eyes, though softened by age, were fiercely alert. "You have something," she said. Maria nodded, offering the letter. Grace unfolded it slowly, her lips pressed thin as she read. When she reached the final line, she exhaled not relief, but release. "He always said she'd come," she murmured. "He didn't say how long it would take." She turned and crossed to a cabinet tucked behind a worn armchair. A key emerged from around her neck, slid into the lock. The door creaked open, revealing a file bound in leather cord older than Eli's lifetime. "I made a copy the day they told me to burn it," Grace said. "I didn't ask why. I just knew someone would need it." She laid the folder on the table. Inside, documents bearing Daniel's name, signatures, wire transfers, tax records for a charity that had no public face. A single logo marked multiple forms, a stylized crown, subtle but consistent. "Crown Room," Grace said quietly. "They laundered money through fake grants." Daniel signed off. "And this," she tapped a line item, "was the last fund he authorized before your husband died." Maria sat down, her breath slow but even. "I have no office, no voice. Just memory." Grace looked at her, something like admiration softening the line of her jaw. "And do you forget that memory is the one thing Crown Room can't forge, silence, or delete?" The words hung in the room like incense, heavy but cleansing. Eli looked between them, eyes round. "So, what do we do with this?" Grace didn't hesitate. "There's someone. He fought them once and they ruined him. But he never stopped watching. We give it to him. They don't come in with guns. They come in with silence." Maria woke with a start. The cabin, though never truly warm, now felt colder, not just from the wind that leaked through the wooden seams, but from something else. Something watching. Outside, the pines stood motionless, their tall silhouettes frozen beneath the weight of an approaching storm. Snow had started to fall quiet and steady, coating the forest floor like a shroud. She reached for the small remote on the windowsill, the one connected to the old outdoor motion camera Russ had helped install years ago. The monitor flickered to life. Two figures, just standing. Not at the door, not near the windows, but along the tree line, half shrouded by shadow, unmoving, waiting. Maria's breath caught. "Eli," she said, voice low. The boy stirred under the old quilt. She knelt beside him. "You need to listen carefully," she said, brushing hair from his forehead. "Take this." From inside her coat, she pulled the small USB and slipped it into the inner lining of Eli's jacket. "If anything happens, you go. Find a man named Kendall Reese. He's in the city. He'll know." Eli sat up, eyes wide, but didn't speak. He nodded once. A hum, low and steady, broke the silence. Headlights flashed faintly between the trees. A black SUV rolled into view, slow, deliberate, blocking the narrow dirt path that led down the hill. No one got out. The engine didn't cut. It just sat there, idling like a held breath. Maria's phone buzzed. A single word. Now. Russ. Moments later, another car's headlights burst through the woods from the opposite direction, barreling toward the SUV. Russ's truck. Tires tore through snow and pine needles, throwing up clouds of frost. The SUV shifted in reverse, backing away just as Russ's horn blared through the night. A distraction enough. "Run," Maria said, grabbing Eli's hand. They burst through the back door and into the forest boots, crunching frozen undergrowth. Behind them, the SUV backed down the trail, its red taillights pulsing like watching eyes. In the fleeing silence, Eli turned just once. One of the men had stepped out, standing between the trees, watching. He didn't move, just smiled, small, deliberate, directly at the boy. Later, in the warmth of Russ's truck engine growling as they sped toward the highway, Eli spoke softly, almost to himself. "That man. He was at my school. Last week." Russ's hands tightened on the wheel. He didn't look back. "They're using the old game," he said. "Scare you first, then strike. But this time, we don't retreat. If I had believed him the first time, you wouldn't be here now." The municipal building of Eldridge Falls was a block of glass and steel, trying to pretend it belonged in a town where most homes had wooden porches and paint that peeled with memory. Maria stood at the reception counter, fingers clenched tightly around the folder holding the original will. Beside her, Eli shifted from foot to foot, the USB drive pressed flat inside his jacket pocket. They were led through security, past two guards, who barely looked up, and into a smaller room labeled Public Inquiries. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Cameras followed every movement. The table at the center gleamed with the indifferent shine of cold stainless steel. He entered quietly Kendall Reese, once an investigator with the Department of Civil Affairs, now reassigned to a desk job after the Harper case collapsed over 2 decades ago. His shoulders had slumped some since then, but his eyes still scanned with sharpness, edged with regret. "You must be Maria Harper," he said, voice even, but not warm. "I am." Reese remained standing, watching her as if waiting for her to blink first. "I don't usually reopen ghosts, especially ones that nearly took my career." Maria reached into her bag and produced the will. This wasn't filed. It should have been. Reese took it cautiously, like it might burn him. He flipped it open, examining the notarization. His eyebrows twitched as he read the signature of the notary, someone he recognized. "And this?" she asked, gesturing to Eli. The boy stepped forward, offering the USB. Reese took it and plugged it into the sleek government-issue laptop sitting beside him. A folder opened. Inside, 3 audio files and 1 video. He clicked the video first. The screen flickered, showing a man sitting in what looked like the cabin, grey at the temples, strong hands folded over a knee. Maria's late husband. "If you're watching this, it means I didn't come back from what I was trying to stop," the man said. "And that means they won. Unless Maria found this. If she did, then someone has to believe her. Someone has to believe me." Reese's jaw tensed, his hand still calloused despite the years hovered over the touchpad. "I knew he was reaching out," he murmured. "I knew. But I didn't follow. I filed the wrong motion. I missed the deadline. They buried it in paperwork. And I let them." Maria watched his face. For the first time in days, she saw something shift. Not pity, not dismissal. Recognition. "Mr. Reese," she said softly, "you might have lost the first time. But I haven't had my turn yet." He closed the laptop and looked up. "I need to verify these files," he said. "But if they're what I think they are, there's a crack in their wall." Kendall Reese tapped his fingers on the metal table, the rhythm uneven. Outside, a wind began to build, brushing past the windows with soft groans. He looked at Maria with a seriousness that had shed all traces of formality. They built this carefully. The Crown Room. Not just a group, a machine. Most people who got close to them didn't know it until it was too late. Maria's voice was steady. "And yet my husband knew." "Yes," Reese said, "and he paid the price. But so did you, didn't you? They left you in silence. Left you wondering if your memories betrayed you." Maria didn't answer. She didn't need to. Reese turned the laptop around. "I'll need to confirm the metadata on these recordings. But if they're genuine and the timestamp lines up with the dates from 2002, this could qualify as grounds for reinvestigation." Eli leaned forward, his face tight with concern. "Will they know Reese met his eyes? If I do this right, not immediately. But once I file for preliminary review, the system pings the involved parties. That includes Daniel Harper." A beat passed. Maria didn't flinch. "So what happens then?" she asked. "We open a sealed hearing. Quiet for now. I'll need to submit the will, the recordings, and the affidavit from you, Mrs. Harper. You'll have to testify. I'll try to keep your name out of the initial wave, but if this escalates—" He didn't finish. "I'm not hiding," Maria said softly. "Not anymore." Reese smiled just a little. "Your husband said you were stronger than most people gave you credit for." Maria allowed herself a small exhale. He wasn't always wrong. Reese stood. "I'll draft the initial motion tonight. But I need you to be sure. Once we move, we can't stop midway." Maria nodded. "I've been still for 20 years. One more moment of hesitation would be the betrayal." As they turned to leave, Reese handed her back the USB. "Keep it close. If anything happens to me, it needs to go to an old contact of mine. I'll write down the name." Eli accepted the slip of paper. On it, G. Walters, ex-Fed. But before they could step out into the hall, Reese said one last thing, voice low, nearly drowned out by the wind. "If I had believed your husband, you wouldn't be here now. But maybe this is how we both begin again. But if I do this again, you won't be safe. They will come." By the time they arrived, the cabin was just smoke and memory. Ash fell like dirty snow as the sun crawled above the horizon. The scent of burnt pine and old paper hung thick in the air, clinging to Maria's coat like a warning. Fire trucks idled behind the cabin's charred frame, their red lights long since extinguished, replaced by the flat indifference of morning. No one spoke. Maria stood with arms crossed tightly over her chest. Eli stayed beside her eyes, wide and unblinking. The wind stirred the grey remnants of what had once held a man's secrets and a woman's last fragments of trust. "There's nothing left," said a firefighter without looking at them. Russ stepped around a blackened stump, his boots crunching over scorched earth. "They came during the night," he said, pointing to faint tire tracks leading away from the road. "No accelerant left behind. Smart. Fast." Maria didn't reply. She knelt near where the floorboards had once groaned under her and Eli's steps. Now only crumbled ash and a few splinters remained. Her eyes caught a glint of something under the soot. Carefully she brushed it away. A small wooden frame. The edges were blackened, but the back was intact. She turned it over. A faint barcode sticker clung to the surface, faded but still legible. Eli leaned in. "Is that Crown Room's seal?" Maria nodded. "It was hidden here, not by accident." A police cruiser approached, sirens, silent tires crunching on gravel. Maria straightened as a young officer exited. He said nothing of the fire. Instead, he held up a phone. "There's a clip you should see." We pulled security footage from the traffic cam 3 miles down. Someone was seen near the cabin hours before the fire. The screen lit up. A grainy video showed a black SUV parked just off the trail. The timestamp, 2:17 a.m. A man stepped out, hooded, moved slowly as if checking his surroundings. Then the camera caught his face in a flash of light from the car's interior. "Daniel." Eli gasped. "Dad." The officer lowered the phone. "We can't confirm intent. No proof he lit the fire." Russ's voice hardened. "So you won't investigate?" "We don't have jurisdiction. This land's outside our county line. You'll need to take it upstate." Russ scoffed. Convenient. Maria didn't react. She walked away past the remains, past the police tape, fluttering uselessly in the breeze. Eli followed. "They're going to keep erasing things, aren't they?" Maria looked at him, calm and quiet. "They can erase places, burn objects, rewrite reports. But they can't erase what we remember." Russ caught up with them. "They're tightening the circle. The next move, it won't be symbolic." Maria stopped walking. The lake rippled beside them, still untouched by fire or men. She said, "Then we stop waiting." Russ raised an eyebrow. "What does that mean?" Maria turned her eyes steady. "It means I'm done being silent." She took Eli's hand and faced the rising light. "I'm going to write everything. From the beginning. What I saw, what I know, what they tried to hide." Russ hesitated. "That could make you a target." "I already am," she said. "But this way I get to choose the story they'll never be able to burn." Maria said, "All right. Then I'll do what an old woman should have done from the start. I'll write it all down. No one expects a handwritten letter anymore. That's why it works." The room was quiet, save for the scratch of pen on paper. Maria sat at her old writing desk, the one she hadn't used in years. The wooden surface bore a slight curve, warped by time and sunlight, but it still held steady under her hand. A brass lamp cast a soft yellow pool around the page. Above it, her wedding photo leaned slightly in its frame, a younger Maria, smiling beside the man who had trusted her with secrets that took 2 decades to bloom. She paused mid-sentence, eyes narrowing slightly, and then resumed writing. "To whom it may concern? My name is Maria Harper. I am 68 years old. I have been called forgetful, fragile, even irrelevant. But I remember more than they wish I did. And I am not afraid anymore." Across the room, Eli sat cross-legged on the carpet, holding his phone steady. He was recording. Maria had asked him to not as proof, but as echo. She looked up from the letter. "Let me read it aloud," once she said. "And then we send it." Eli nodded. Maria cleared her throat, then began, "I write this not as a victim, but as a witness. In 2002, my husband died, under circumstances I was told to accept. I did. Until now. Until my grandson heard things no child should. Until I saw the fire they lit trying to erase what was left." Her voice did not waver. She read the full letter in one breath. Her words deliberate, not loud, not dramatic, but heavy with the kind of truth that made silence shift. When she finished, Eli hit stop on the recording. "Should we email it?" Maria folded the paper carefully. "No, we mail it. But we send a scanned copy to Grace. She'll know what to do if the rest doesn't make it." The printer hummed softly. The image on the screen, her words in looping cursive, glowed like a memory refusing to fade. 2 days later, the envelope would arrive at the front desk of WLRS Channel 7 News in Eldridge County. A young assistant would open it, confused at first, then call the producer. But that was still to come. For now, Maria sealed the envelope and set it by the door. That's when the phone rang. She glanced at the screen. Daniel. Eli's posture stiffened. Maria answered, holding the device slightly away from her face. "Mom?" Daniel said, his voice tense but polished. "I heard." "I saw. Look, we don't have to do this publicly. Let's sit down. We'll figure it out." Maria's tone was gentle, but unyielding. "You don't have to do anything, Daniel. The truth is, walking by itself now." A beat of silence. Then the call ended. Maria turned away from the phone, eyes calm, and returned to the living room. She picked up the scarf Eli had outgrown, but still kept near, folded it neatly, placed it beside the letter. Eli looked up. "Do you think they'll read it?" "They'll have no choice," Maria said. But the peace didn't last. Her phone buzzed again, not a call this time, but a message. No contact name. Just the number. Just one line. One last warning. "Continue, and your son won't stay safe." Maria didn't flinch. She read it, then deleted it. "We send the letter," she said. Eli's eyes were wide. Even now, especially now. A message arrived from an unknown number one last time. "If you continue, your son won't be safe." He was just gone. No trace, no call. Only silence. The school bus arrived empty. Maria stood by the curb, her fingers tightening around the scarf she'd knitted for Eli. Parents gathered, exchanged polite nods. Some left quickly, their children rushing into their arms. But Eli didn't appear. She stepped forward, scanning the last few faces. Nothing. Her feet moved on instinct toward the front of the bus. "Excuse me?" she said to the driver, her voice sharp but calm. "Was Eli Harper on your list today?" The driver blinked. "Didn't see him, Ma'am. Thought maybe he stayed home." Maria turned without answering. 15 minutes later, she was at the school, walking straight past the secretary's desk. "Where is Mrs. Alden?" she asked. "My grandson didn't come home." The teacher emerged confused. "I assumed he had the day off." "Camille emailed us this morning, said he had a family matter." Maria stared. No one in this family said that. She left before more explanations came. By mid-afternoon, she and Russ were at the bus stop again. The area behind it was quiet, too quiet. Overgrown brush, a rusted fence, and patches of gravel that led to a weedy clearing. Maria's heart slowed as she stepped into the space behind the shelter. There it was. Eli's backpack, the straps slashed, lying half submerged in damp earth. One of his gloves was a few feet away, palm up, as if waving goodbye. Her knees buckled slightly, but Russ caught her arm. Call it in, he said, already dialing. By the time local police arrived, Maria was sitting on the curb, silent. Russ stood watch. They combed the area, asked questions, took notes, but nothing about their pace suggested urgency. Then Camille arrived. Her usual poise crumbled the moment she saw the backpack. No, no, he wouldn't just... Her breath hitched. He's just a boy. Maria, still seated, looked up. Their eyes met, not as mother and daughter-in-law, but as two women who had both, in different ways, failed a child. In that moment, Camille stopped speaking. She knelt beside Maria and for once said nothing cruel. That silence said everything. Russ returned with a grainy security photo from a nearby building. "It's him," he said. "Harland. Same ring, same coat." He pushed Eli into a dark SUV. Grace's message came in as they reviewed the footage. They left something behind it read, "Your letter, printed and stained. The bottom line, has blood." Maria took the photo Grace sent, her own handwriting now darkened by dried crimson. Someone had made it symbolic. Someone wanted her to know that the truth she dared speak had been seen and punished. That night in her living room, she held the blood-marked letter in her hands. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. Instead, she whispered to the empty air, "You are the reason I still remember, and I will not let them erase you." Then the phone rang. It was Reese. His voice was tight, clipped with urgency. "I got it," he said. "Federal warrant. We can go public. We can bring this entire case down, but Maria, you have to choose." Maria closed her eyes. Reese continued. "We can move now, press arrests exposure. Or we delay, track Harland, find the boy. But we might lose momentum. The window's tight." Maria looked again at the blood-stained letter. Her hand traced the last line written in ink, now underscored in pain. Reese called, "I just got a federal warrant, but you have to choose rescue the boy or go public with the evidence now." They broke the boy's glasses, but not his voice. The screen lit up across the room, the same way her fingers trembled as she pressed the send key. Maria's voice, calm and unflinching, echoed through the live broadcast. It wasn't her face the viewers saw, but the flickering video she and Eli had recorded inside the old cabin shadows on wooden walls, a hand gripping a faded letter, the quiet cadence of memory refusing to fade. "They told me to forget," Maria's voice said, "but I didn't. I remember everything, and I'm not afraid anymore." At the press conference, agents flanked Reese as he placed a box of evidence on the table. Flashbulbs flared. The headlines began to form themselves. But Maria was not there. She stood in the cold, outside an old cabin, this one newer, but still surrounded by the same silence. Reese held the GPS readout from Eli's wristband. Russ gripped the wheel eyes trained on the small dirt path that led them deeper into the woods. "They moved him here," Reese said. "An off-grid crown room holding site. We've got one shot." Maria nodded once. Her scarf whipped in the wind. Then came the blades of the helicopter slicing the air. Agents moved like shadows. Commands were whispered, not shouted. The cabin loomed ahead, just another wooden box to bury something precious. They breached the door. The stench of mildew rope and fear hit them first. Then the sound one breath, then another. And a boy. Eli sat in the corner, arms tied loosely. His glasses were broken. One lens was gone. A bruise darkened his cheek. But his eyes found Maria instantly. She ran to him. Her knees hit the floor. She didn't ask if he was okay. She already knew. She touched his face, then his shoulder. "I'm here," she whispered. "I never stopped." Reese and Russ secured the perimeter. Harland tried to flee but didn't get far. When they dragged him out, he laughed. "That old woman," he muttered. "She can't win." Russ leaned closer. She didn't need to win, he said. She just needed to remember. Inside the cabin, Eli stirred. His lips moved slowly, his voice scratchy and dry. They wanted her to forget. But she remembered. I remember too. Later at the police station, Maria sat quietly in the hallway. The noise of reporters' officers typing ringing phones, none of it reached her. She was watching the front doors. When they opened, Daniel stepped through. He looked older, smaller, as if the weight of unspoken guilt had finally found its place on his shoulders. Camille wasn't with him. He stopped when he saw Maria, and then he knelt, in front of everyone. His voice broke as he spoke. "Mom, I have nothing left to ask forgiveness for. I just ask, don't be silent again." Maria didn't speak. She looked at him for a long time. In the corner, a nurse adjusted Eli's blanket. He was asleep, lips slightly parted, the rhythm of safety finally lulling him. Maria's gaze drifted to the window, grey sky, soft wind. No triumph, no applause. But for the first time in years, she didn't feel like a shadow in her own story. Daniel came to the police station, saw Maria. He knelt, choking, "Mom, I have nothing left to beg for. Just please don't go silent again." The daffodils came early this year. Like they knew something ended. Maria pressed her fingers into the soil. It was still damp from last night's rain, cool and clinging to her palms, but soft, willing. The cabin had settled into its own rhythm again. The wind had softened. The wood no longer creaked with tension. And in the front garden, a patch of earth that had once been a forgotten square of weeds, small yellow daffodils swayed under the early spring light. She didn't remember planting them, but somehow they had arrived. Eli sat cross-legged on the porch, his book open but unread. His glasses, now fixed, slid slightly down his nose. He looked up as she brushed soil off her hands. "Grandma," he said quietly, "do you still hate my dad?" Maria turned to him, not startled. The question had taken its time. "I don't hate him," she said, "but I won't forget him either." Eli nodded. That seemed enough. Inside, the old radio hummed with a jazz tune barely louder than the breeze. The cabin, once the keeper of a dead man's secrets, had become something softer. Not a home, perhaps, but a beginning. Maria found the envelope tucked into the stack of mail that morning. No return address. But the handwriting was unmistakably Camille's. She opened it, reading slowly. "We're learning how to live without lying. Maybe the first step is to stay silent for a while. Thank you for what you didn't say back." Maria folded the letter and placed it under a book. The phone rang an hour later. Grace's voice came through the line, brittle but warm. "Russ wants to write the whole thing down," she said. "From the Crown Room to now. He asked if you'd give your version." Maria wiped her hands on a towel. Looked at the daffodils again. "Tell him not to put my name," she said. "Write it as the one who remembered. That's all." Grace paused. "Then he'll like that." The day wore on gently. No surprises. No knocks on the door. Maria sat back in the rocking chair and closed her eyes for a moment. Not to sleep, but to listen. The world was quieter now. Not silent. Just calm. Then she heard Eli's small voice from the edge of the garden. "Grandma," he called, waving her over. "Come see." She rose slowly, her knees stiff but sure, and walked toward him. He was kneeling next to a gnarled root, the spot where wildflowers once grew, but had been trampled during their escape. Now, green threads of life pushed through the soil again. "It's growing back," he said. "A new sprout, like it was never crushed." Maria knelt beside him. She didn't say, "That's not how memory works," or it takes time. She didn't need to. Instead, she placed her hand over his, and together they watched the fragile leaf rise toward the sun. Eli watered the last patch, pointed at an old root. "It's growing again, Grandma. A sprout, like it was never crushed." In the bottom drawer, wrapped in blue ribbon, were all the letters she never sent. The basement still smelled like cedar and thyme. The light from the oil lamp wavered gently across the stone wall, casting long shadows on the floorboards. Maria descended the stairs slowly, one hand grazing the banister, the other holding a small iron key. She hadn't opened that drawer in years. Not since before Daniel stopped visiting regularly. Not since her husband passed. Not since she began writing letters she never dared send. In the far corner of the basement sat the cabinet. Old, scratched, familiar. She unlocked the bottom drawer. Inside lay a bundle wrapped in pale blue ribbon, slightly frayed at the edges. Letters. Dozens of them, folded carefully. Dated in tidy cursive. She picked them up like one might hold old lace, fragile but woven with meaning. The first envelope, yellowed and creased, was addressed simply, "To you, the day I forget." She opened it slowly. Her own handwriting stared back at her. "If I ever forget the way you held my hand before sleep, remind me. If I forget why I stayed quiet at the table, forgive me. If I forget who I am, remember for me." Maria smiled faintly. This one had been for herself, a memory tucked away as armor. She unfolded another dated just after her 60th birthday. "Daniel, I don't write this for you to read. I write it so I won't carry it forever. You didn't mean to hurt me, but you stopped seeing me. That was enough." Her fingers trembled, but not from grief. Not anymore. Next was a letter to her husband, written in the early days after his funeral. "You told me the truth might get buried, but not to let it stay there. I didn't. Not because I was brave, but because your silence asked me to speak. A noise above a rustling of bird wings brushing against the window." She paused, let the quiet return. She kept reading. Some letters were full of doubt, others filled with small joys. Today, Eli laughed in his sleep, or pain. "They said I forgot, but I didn't, and in every one a small signature M. There was one envelope at the bottom she didn't recognize. Tucked in the folds, brittle at the edges. She opened it. Blank. Except for a line in the center, "You are not invisible." She blinked once, twice, then began to write again. This time not to anyone, just to write. She took out a fresh page and in her steady hand began, "Today the garden remembered. The daffodils bloomed early. Maybe they knew something had ended, or maybe something new had begun." Maria set the pen down and looked around the basement, its walls thick with time and silence. The lamp flickered beside her, a golden hush wrapped around the room. She gathered the letters, carefully tied the blue ribbon back around them, and placed them in the drawer once more. She locked it, not to hide them, but to keep them. Not as secrets, but as memories. Proof of her voice even when unspoken. As she stood, the wood of the stairs creaked beneath her feet, not with burden, but with recognition. Each step up felt lighter than the one before. At the threshold, she paused to blow out the lamp, casting the room into a soft twilight. The glow faded slowly like breath, leaving gently into the dark. When she stepped outside, the air was clean and cool, threaded with birdsong and the smell of fresh soil. The forest, so thick with mystery in the months before, now seemed almost kind. Life was returning in sprigs and whispers. She settled into the wooden chair on the porch. Eli was not home. He had gone with Grace to town for new books, a little outing Maria had encouraged with a smile. The quiet was not lonely. It was whole. In her lap, she held a notebook, half empty, half waiting. She flipped to the final page and wrote slowly, "I never mailed any of them, but I wrote everyone, because I lived." She closed the book. Later that day, Eli found a small folded letter tucked behind a photo frame. His name wasn't on the outside, but he opened it anyway. It said, "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. But don't worry, I went with all my memories intact." He didn't cry. He sat beside the drawer in the basement, holding the letter, and whispered, "I remember too." Outside the cabin, wind stirred the trees. A deer crossed the path, pausing briefly to lift its head toward the porch, before vanishing into the woods. Maria stood at the window, watching the quiet world move. She did not need applause, or revenge, or even answers. She needed only the soil, the letters, the quiet understanding that she had kept something alive when others tried to bury it. And so she lived, quietly, remembering. Always remembering. They tried to silence an old woman with confusion, with threats with fire, and still she remembered. Her voice, once ignored at a family table, became the quiet current that pulled a mountain of secrets into the light. Justice did not arrive with sirens or applause, but it came as steady and sharp as the first thaw of spring through frozen ground. Because truth, once awakened, does not sleep again, and sometimes the smallest memory is enough to collapse the tallest lie. What part of her journey stayed with you the most? If you've ever felt unheard, unloved, or underestimated, leave a comment and let your voice echo too. Don't forget to like and follow Heavy Stories for more tales that prove it's never too late to be remembered.